All right. Well, thank you guys for being on our wrap-up call for today. So I can't believe the project is wrapping up. I feel like we just started. It went by so quickly. But let me run through this and I'm going to turn it over to, hold on one second. I have a notification about, I think, this call. Hold on one second. Blue Ridge Peds is having a hard time logging in. Well, we'll just hold on. Well, I'll get moving here and then actually hold on one second. I'm so sorry, you guys. I just want to make sure she can be a part of this. Oh shoot. Let me stop sharing just really quick. I apologize. Let me go to, sorry, I'll make sure everybody can log in. Send this to her really quick. Okay. Okay. Okay, back. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's what we are going to cover today. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Crick, and she's going to do kind of a welcome and thank you again for participation kind of spiel. We're going to have a quick sustainability presentation. Ronnie, who is our QI consultant on the project, recorded a presentation for you guys. We're going to do the final data presentation from Zainab. I'm going to go over some of the PDSA highlights from the project, so different topics that you guys all have attempted and tried and some successes that you guys have had. I want to touch on our individual practice meetings. It's something we sort of decided that we would love to do. So I'm going to share those details with you, and then just a few project reminders. So Dr. Crick, I'm going to turn over to you real quick.
Thanks, Lori. Can you guys all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any grand speech. I really just wanted to say thank you so much for this journey that we've been on together for the last 6 months or so. It has truly been a pleasure to see the passion and energy and success that you guys are bringing to this project. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and I've been really impressed with the different ideas you've brought to the table on how to approach this work, and really impressed with the success that you're finding, both in PDSAs that work and you expand, and PDSAs that don't work and you learn from that on kind of how to make things go a little bit better the next time around. So really just wanted to say thank you for all your great work. I hope to have the opportunity to work with you again in the future. And thanks for joining us for our final call together.
Yay. Okay. So again, this is us. We haven't changed much. So proud of our group. And then this is, now I've learned with our recorded presentations, as soon as I get to the next slide, it's going to start. So here is our recorded presentation from Ronnie about sustainability.
Hi, my name is Ronnie Christopher. I'm so sorry I can't be with you in person, but I am excited to talk about sustaining our gains and building reliability. At the end of any project, the big question is, well, we've done this work, now what happens? And the worst thing that can ever happen in improvement science is putting a lot of hard work and energy into trying to create a better outcome for patients and not having it sustain. And so I want to talk about some of the principles behind reliability and sustainability and think through how you might apply them as you go on beyond this project and into other work that you might be doing. Our objectives for today are really to build on those core competencies and skills that you've practiced in our time together with the Ohio AAP and all of our advisors on this project. And think about the core skills you already have that you brought into the project and that you're taking when you leave the project. We want to learn techniques for sustaining change. This is really around sort of the methods and theories that are well evidenced and tell us the things that have to happen to sustain change over time. And we want to understand like how reliability plays into sustainability. I'm going to break it down into some simple concepts, and hopefully, my personal goal is that I'll give you some things to think about, and you'll try something new about the way you practice as a team. But let's just anchor to where we started. In improvement science, we're always asking these three questions. What are we trying to improve? How will we know if it's an improvement? And what can we do to reach that improvement? So what are we trying? Sets our goal. And our goals are usually based on opportunities that we see where we're not doing something consistently or have the best outcome we're hoping to achieve. How will we know it's an improvement? That's how we measure the data that we use. And what can we try to reach it? That's where PDSA cycles and changes come into play. What's interesting about improvement science is that anytime we're doing it as a team, we're trying to dissect, why can't we achieve a goal that we want to achieve? And it's very common and likely that we'll say, if patients would do something better. And I just want to stop for a minute and ask us as we go into these next few slides to put yourself in the shoes of a patient. From a patient's perspective, and if you are a patient, you would want this too. We want to know that when we're seeking care, the people we're seeking care from are 100% of the time giving us their best effort. And so when we are looking at an opportunity to improve something, before we place the responsibility for the improvement solely on someone other than our own team, we need to think about, what I mean when I say that is place the responsibility of improvement solely on the patient. It's really a 50-50 exchange in most instances. So what do we need to do and what do we want them to do? But at the end of the day, all of the ability to try to engage them differently, to try to make the changes that we seek really sits with us. Most of it sits with us as a team. How we think about it, how we behave as a team, how we work as a team, what processes we use to understand what we're doing, how we dissect what we're doing and put plans in place to do it better. And so improvement science helps us sort of level set that. Where's the opportunity to improve? But when we think about reliability science and we think about trying to sustain gains, this is where we kind of flip our thinking to how we approach any problem. Do we see it as daunting and overwhelming, or do we see it as an opportunity? So in the literature and the evidence, we learn that high reliability organizations, they're often called HROs, are preoccupied with failure. In healthcare, you can often see in a hospital where a unit might be called an HRO. A lot of times those are units where there's a lot of risk for infection and things that could really, derail a hospital system. But a lot of hospital systems apply this idea of qualifying a particular unit as an HRO, as an example. But it doesn't just have to be an entity like that. Teams can be highly reliably functioning teams. The idea is if you're going to be highly reliable, you must be preoccupied with failure. And in this instance, failure is about being preoccupied in an attempt to protect something. Seeing that if you can get ahead of a failure, you're protecting something. And in our instance, protecting is protecting a patient, protecting them from a poor outcome. And so that's different than thinking about failure as a reason to blame or as a reason to fear. We don't want to think about it that way. When we have a commitment to being reliable, then we recognize that failure is the most important data point. Understanding when it happens, why it happens, where it could happen, and testing the theories to see if it will happen. But we can't do that at a global scale because we could cause harm. So that's why we do PDSA cycles. We start small and we think about putting processes in place first. Then we think about engaging patients differently. And then we start thinking about how to try some new things with more patients over time. And if we go small, and we start to crawl small, then we can run fast. We skip walking. That's the best thing about PDSA. You kind of crawl for a while and then you start to run. And that is why this way of thinking can really help us switch in our mind that failure is really an opportunity, not something that we did that was wrong. It's something that we anticipated and created a better opportunity from. It's important also to understand the difference between reliability and sustainability. We always like to use a lot of words in healthcare and acronyms, etc. And sometimes we throw them around not understanding the definition of them. And so I want to just take a minute to say to you, you can have a sustainable process that is not reliable. And in this instance, what I mean is you have to think of reliability as you are achieving the outcome you want. And if you are not achieving that outcome and you're not getting the desired result, then you are probably sustaining something that isn't working. The best way to know that this is happening is if you have a lot of language in your group where you're saying things like, this is how we've always done it. Yikes, yikes, yikes. That is as soon as you hear that, if you hear yourself saying it, if you hear your colleagues and your peers and your team saying it, if you are a highly reliable organization or a highly reliable team, you do not accept that. You look at that and say that is the very first diagnostic kind of pain point that tells us we could do better. So this idea of this is how we've always done it doesn't work. We need to eradicate that thinking. And it's hard to do because when you're tired and fatigued and you're not sure where to make change, it's easy to just fall back on, well, this is status quo. What else can I do? It can make us feel less engaged, but a highly reliable team or organization does not allow that kind of thinking to permeate its culture. And so we have to hold each other responsible for saying, if you feel that way, let's try to understand why and what we have to get to. Now notice that I didn't say you shouldn't feel that way. That's not what I'm saying here. And that's one of the biggest mistakes people make or teams make. I'm not saying that you should tell somebody you can't think this way. People feel what they feel and they think what they think. And so what we want to be able to do as a highly reliable team and organization, we want to say, if this feeling is coming up, that this is how we've always done it and we can't get past it, we need to understand what is behind that. And that's what we should be focusing our change effort on. And that's a different way of trying to dissect the problem, but it gets engagement on a team that helps you move forward and pivot beyond the status quo and the day-to-day. And again, I just have to hammer this home. The only way that you can really break through those kind of walls is to embrace the fact that failure is fabulous. But when we think of failing, if you're a perfectionist, the idea of failing makes you sweat. If you are not a perfectionist, the idea of failing maybe doesn't motivate you that much. Failing is okay. Either one doesn't get us to our goal. We need everybody to recognize that failure is the opportunity to do something new and different. And the only way that we can do that is that people have to feel responsible for what we're trying to achieve as a team. This is one of my personal pet peeves in healthcare, is that we are always asking for accountability. Who's accountable? Who's accountable? Who's accountable? When I work with teams over time and I realize that they were struggling trying to make improvements, one of the first things I try to understand is, does everybody on the team feel responsible for something? So we want to create an environment where I feel responsible, therefore I'll hold myself accountable. Because if we don't feel responsible, we can try to put accountability on anybody and it will fail. It will fail. So the opportunity is to really say, if we're going to try to improve anything, something, do we feel a responsibility to do it? And it's worth it to talk that through as a team so that everybody understands what level of responsibility they feel or don't feel. And then try to come up with a common goal around, well, we're responsible for at least doing this X as a team. Those conversations are really important. They're very illuminating, and they help you understand where you are getting stuck as a team for sure. But I just want to say, if you are constantly having to say, I'm going to hold you accountable, or you're going to be accountable, and you're still not achieving your goals, stop dead in the tracks and ask yourself and your team member, do you feel responsible for this? Because if the person says no, they'll never hold themselves accountable. And that's what that's about. So these R words are important. Reliability requires feeling responsible. Being a reliable organization means I also feel responsible. So let's think about reliability science here and just sort of the basics of it. We talk about improvement science, our three questions. What are we trying to change? How do we know that change is an improvement? And what do we have to do to create those improvements? That's our basic improvement science. Reliability science is a little bit, different and builds off of those things. So the first thing is, interestingly, the literature tells us that if you have vigilance and hard work when you're making process changes, you can generally get to 80% reliability pretty easily. Getting up to 80% is not really the heavy lift. Going from 80 to 95 or 100% is where it's really heavy. But getting up to 80 is not that hard if you just put in some vigilance and hard work. You have to do things like have consistent awareness and training where you're using data to tell you if something's working or not working. This is why the improvement science techniques work here to help you get to 80%. Using visual reminders, like, constantly sharing your data with the team so everybody sees how you're doing, reminding people of principles they need to constantly practice. Those things are helpful. And having spot audits to raise risk can really help you get to and maintain 80% of a change. But now put yourself in a patient's shoes. A patient expects that 100% of the time we're going to put our best effort forward, even if they choose not to do something with it. They can still make their decisions. But the expectation is that 100% of the time they're going to get the best version of us. So they would like us to be better than 80%. And then you as a patient want your healthcare provider to be better than 80% too. So when we think about reliability and moving from 80% to 95%, I haven't even said 100 here. We're going to focus on 95. If we think about moving from 80% to 95%, there are some key strategies that if you use them with consistency can help you make that change and sustain it over time with high reliability. So using checklists and forcing them as a forcing function, checklists on, did you do this every time? Did you have the conversation you wanted to have? Did you capture it in the EHR? Whatever the checklist is, having the checklist done and using that checklist with regularity. Initially, you probably need to use it every patient every time. As you start to build momentum and make changes, you can use the checklist more sporadically, but you can never take it away. If you're highly reliable, you need to have checklists as part of your process. You also need to have scheduled audits. So you move from just spot auditing to having days and times and data that you're going to audit with regularity. And then you need to also transparently share those audits so that you can dissect what you're seeing and you know exactly when your pivot points are. So you might say, okay, we've achieved, 90% consistency in how we're practicing. And we'll let that fluctuate between 85% and 92% over time. But the minute we start to see 85% or lower over 2 months, that's our pivot point and we're back to basics. So these are 4 really key critical behaviors that help you create reliability that will help you sustain your change. Checklist, you start those off with diligence and just making sure you're doing them regularly, and then they become more sporadic, but they never go away entirely. You schedule audits, days and times where that is an activity that can never be pushed. You share transparently what you are seeing in your audits, and you have a threshold that when you go below the threshold, you are immediately remediating. If you can put those 4 things in place and do that with a level of confidence, feeling responsible to keep them in place, you can hold yourself accountable to maintain your gains. And that is really what it is about. A lot of this science is about how you behave and the processes you put in place, not necessarily what you're doing. It's really how you behave. So, other strategies to think about when you're looking at sustainability and reliability are these ideas of kind of adult thinking and cognitive behavioral change. So, here are other strategies that can really help. It is important to know that if you want a change to stick, you must create 8 different unique opportunities to learn it and understand what it is. The rules of 8 is really critical in adult learning theory. So this is why PDSAs can work over time, because a lot of times you're testing the same sort of theory or method, but you're trying it multiple different ways, and you're giving yourself some input to see something differently, learn about it differently, react to it differently. That's one of the reasons why that methodology can help you pivot quickly. But the other thing here about the rules of 8 is that if you're going to make a change that you want to stick, you have to have a way to talk about it, a way to see it, a way to hardwire it with a process in place. You have to do those 3 things multiple ways. You can't just do it once. You can't just have a poster up in the lunchroom and think that a change is going to happen. You can't just have one conversation passing in the hallway and think that a change is going to happen. You have to do both of those things maybe, but you also have to have it on your agenda as the second agenda topic every time that you have a meeting, or you have to have it some flag in your electronic health record that reminds you to do something, or have post-it notes at the desk, or have a process in place that has language when the registration clerk is signing someone in to gather a piece of information, and you have to share it broadly. So 8 ways that you're talking about the same thing. You want this change to happen. 8 different ways that you are across your team making sure people know we are charging toward this particular outcome. 8 things. Really, really important to think about that. The next thing is that you have to have accountable systems for rewarding behavior. You need to set goals for when you will reward something. So when are you going to have a pizza party? When are you going to, have 10 minutes to just, share jokes with each other, whatever it is that you want to do? Or when are you going to go to happy hour as a team to celebrate something? You want to have really clear and distinct goals, and you want to use them consistently for how you will reward behavior. If you want to, as a leader, reward behavior among your team, you also have to have really distinct and clear goals on when and how you are evaluating what kind of behavior you will reward. And you have to be transparent about that. Not doing any of those things will backfire, and you look like there's favoritism. It can create animosity. Just very clear. When we do this, we will celebrate this way. When I see these behaviors, you are able to earn this gift card, whatever that is. Including sustainability principles in your job descriptions and your team recognitions can also be very important, and the way that you interview can be important. We put a lot of responsibilities in job descriptions. Those don't translate always to what we think are accountabilities, and changing or looking at your job descriptions to say, responsibilities include, we'll hold you accountable by. Those kinds of things in a job description can be really, really helpful for bringing the right kind of people onto your team. And then building diagnostic thinking into your agendas and your conversations. This is really about setting that pivot point. When will we know that what we have put in place is at risk for not sustaining, and being very clear in your agendas that you're talking transparently about it. I like to encourage teams to say things like, hey, how are we doing on HPV vaccination rates? Are we at risk? Like, just ask the question, are we at risk for not doing as well as we know we can? That is one way that you can inject that kind of language into your conversations that allows you to think differently about it. If you ask somebody, are we at risk? Immediately that person starts to process, what do you mean by that? Are we? I'm not sure. Let's think about it. Versus, how are we doing? That doesn't create the same kind of exchange. So I hope that these ideas and principles were helpful and that they've given you an opportunity to think about it. I wish you could see me as I was doing this session. My hands were going crazy. I talk a lot with my hands, and I thought about putting myself on video, but I thought I might distract you because this is a topic I'm very passionate about. I hope that came through. I promise you that if you are thoughtful about some of the things I shared, you will see a difference in the way you behave as a team. Remember, your number one diagnostic that you're at risk for not being able to build a reliable opportunity, which is creating an outcome you desire, reliability, creating an outcome you desire. Your number one diagnostic that tells you you're at risk is if you have, this is how we always do it, thinking in your site. If you have that kind of thinking, you're at risk already, and you need to think about how you get around that for sure. And some of the things I shared here today can help you do it. So good luck. Continue on your improvement journey. Thank you for taking good care of your patients. Continue to be in the pursuit of caring for them better. And just thank you for your service in healthcare. It can be a hard thing to do, especially in these days and times. And I personally appreciate every person that shows up every single day to try to provide good health care to every patient that they see. Take good care and good luck to you.
Awesome. Well, big thanks to Ronnie for putting that together. And I apologize if you could hear my dog barking in the background. Since it's so nice out today, I have doors and windows open and all the dogs are communicating. So I don't know if anyone had anything they wanted to share about the presentation as they think about sustainability as we close the project. If not, I'll hand it over to Zainab and we'll do our final data presentation.
Yes, so I know some of the data may not be very encouraging, but we had a little bit of a short discussion just before the rest of you joined, and we can go over that a little bit as we go through the slides. So I'm ready for the first slide. So here we have metric one for all of the practices combined. I'm sure you already know the order of these slides by now, but so because we have ended the QI months, what I did in the first graph was that I combined all of the QI months, so April through August, and I averaged those into one QI value or prevalence. And then here on the second chart, you can see just the trend over from baseline and through the QI month. And metric one, as we've mentioned previously, and as we've talked about throughout the project, is a little bit more difficult to increase just because your values are so large, because you're looking at your population over the past 3 years. And we also had a discussion, like I said, just a few minutes before the rest of you joined. One of the physicians was asking that, if we're doing some recruitment and we're having more patients come into the clinic or into the practice, and we're starting the administration of the vaccine, then technically they still haven't completed their both doses. And so that will result in your metric one prevalence decreasing a little bit, because your patient population that you're applying this metric to is increasing as you're bringing more patients in to start your vaccine series. So overall, the practices had about a 5.4% increase in the combined QI months. So it was about a 5% increase from 46 to 49. And it's a relatively steady trend over time. So I'm ready for the next slide. And here we have all the practices individually. As you can see, again, it's relatively steady. There are a few decreases which could potentially be explained by what we just mentioned. And then we have some increases here in nationwide. We've seen a little bit of an increase from baseline. And then the OSU practices also have had a relatively steady trend. Grandview had a little bit of a downward trend. So I think I mentioned this to Lori, and I think she'll probably mention it again towards the end of the meeting, but if you had any questions specifically about your practice, or you wanted us to look at things together, or you wanted to talk about things, please feel free to reach out to either me or Lori, and she can get you in contact with me, and we can discuss that or any other questions that you have regarding the data. But here, again, is just an overview of all of the other practices individually. I'm ready for the next slide. Okay, and so metric 2 is the vaccine administration rate. Metric 1 was the completion rate. And so when we talked about recruitment and including additional patients into your pool of patients that could start their vaccine, technically they weren't able to complete it maybe during the project period time, but vaccine administration rate can potentially tell us if we're having more patients come in, and if we're administering vaccines, whether it's the first dose or the second dose. And as you can see here in the first graph, also it's a relatively small increase, but as you see here in the second graph, from May through August, you can see a relatively high increase. So we increased from about 47 prevalence of 47% to 63%. And that 63 is also higher than the 52 in baseline that we've seen. So the combined practices, if we're looking at August compared to baseline, we have a 21% increase. And again, you know, as we start collecting some of the sustainability data, we can hopefully see those numbers continue to increase. But that just kind of gives you an idea of, you know, potentially having new patients and starting their vaccine series. So this was a very good result for August. And again, the next slide will have the individual practices. And again, like I said before, if you have any questions specific to your practice, we can definitely help with that. As we can see here, most of the practices increased from baseline. Blue Ridge, Hilliard Pediatrics, Nationwide had a very significant increase. And some of the OSU practices also had increases from baseline. So I'm looking at baseline and the final month of QI. So those are good signs. I know maybe metric 1 was a little discouraging, but we've really tried to, kind of ease you a little bit and say, that this is what we were expecting. We weren't expecting to see a super high change. So I hope that makes you feel a little bit better. And we're ready for metric 3. And here, metric 3, we see that from baseline through August, we have had about a 12% increase, which is also very good. And this is just the vaccine, just discussion of the vaccine. And we're ready for the next slide. I know, I think we haven't received some data from Augusta. So if you don't see your data in here and you would like to send us that data or anything, we can definitely create a chart for you. But you can see here, the data is a little bit up and down in 3 of the practices. But overall, Hilliard Pediatrics saw an increase in the rate of discussion, and all of the OSU practices saw an increase. The other practices, Blue Ridge remained pretty steady throughout the project. So overall, I think that the practices did a really good job. And again, if you have any questions now, or if any questions come up later, we can definitely answer those for you as well.
Thanks, Zainab. I was going to mention too, we also have our 4th metric, which is the provider confidence, but we are still getting some of those post-survey results in. So we'll be able to share that with the group once we get that final data. But I did want to open up if anybody has any thoughts or feedback or any questions about our data. Quiet group today. But thank you so much for putting all of that together. Okay, so just real quick, we just want to cover some of the PDSA topics that you had some success with each month, which is kind of a fun way to look at it. And then if you see some topics that were successful for other practices and maybe you haven't tried it yet, obviously you don't have to send us a PDSA anymore, but you're more than welcome to try some of these techniques to see if you can increase some of those HPV rates at your practice. So in May, some of the main topics we looked at were checking vaccine status at every non-acute office visit and offer the vaccines, trying that vaccine sandwich techniques with all of your providers. And this one's specific to the PAG, the PAG group, but the RNs called the PCPs, the primary care physicians, to see if the patient completed the HPV series. If not, the vaccine was offered at their clinic, which is awesome. So in June, we were excited to see that there was the use of the HPV Wrap cards at patient intake to start conversation. They were continuing, you guys were my quotes look funny there, continuing the vaccine sandwich technique, and then doing outreach to patients who are overdue for well visits. So awesome to see that you guys had success with all of that. And then finally, you all were super excited in July and had a ton of things that you worked on. So you guys were looking at documenting discussion and education of declined HPV. Again, continuing that vaccine sandwich technique, which we love. We did have some practices beginning the HPV vaccine at 9 years with the use of the Wrap cards, which we think is very cool. So even if you weren't necessarily successful with vaccinating at 9, at least the conversation was started and great information was given to patients and parents. Continuing outreach to patients overdue for well visits. We did have a practice that added a QR code with a smart phrase to after visit summary paperwork that included a link for HPV info from the CDC website for patients who refuse or decline HPV series, which I think is really awesome. Providing transparent list to all providers of missed opportunities, which we love. You shame those doctors into everybody falling. I'm just kidding. No, but it does work. It does work when you're transparent like that. And then, of course, one of our favorites is introducing the HPV vaccine as a cancer prevention vaccine. So awesome techniques, things that we discussed, I think, initially, and some that you guys did on your own, which I love. But, you know, we appreciate all the hard work. And as you can see in the data, definitely had some success. So one thing I wanted to share is that in addition to this kind of wrap up meeting, we wanted to have time with each of your practices to sort of dive just a smidge deeper into the QI project itself, just to get your feedback. Our hope is to expand this project outside of Ohio. I know you have a couple of you guys outside of Ohio now, but even more expansion. And so we'd love to see what ideas you had, or if there were any sort of challenges that we could have helped overcome, things like that. The idea of this is to do it, it should be pretty quick, maybe like a half-hour call. Ideally, we'd love to have it done in October, but we can easily push it back to November as well. So I will be emailing you guys next week to start throwing out some dates and times. As many people as you can get on the call is great, but we're happy with just a lead physician or, you know, a staff person who's been involved in the project from the beginning. One thing that's going to be kind of unique is that Elizabeth Dawson, who I think is on the call still today, she is going to be conducting the surveys for us, so you can be honest and you don't have to be nice because you liked working with us. So look for an email from me next week. And my dog is barking at the other dog. Sorry about that. So just a couple final reminders. One, before I dive into this, we did have a conversation early on before we started the call about uploading the data into the HPVQI website. So I will look into doing that on Monday. We will also upload this final slide deck and recording of the call as well. And don't forget, we have the provider confidence post survey. We have that due October 1st, as well as your MOC Part 4 attestation is due. So if you have any questions about that, please let us know. I will send a reminder about our sustainability data poll. We're going to ask that to be sent to us December 7th. And if you haven't done so already, send us that invoice for your practice stipend for participation. We'd love to reward you and be able to hopefully help continue some of your HPV processes to help increase your rates. But that is really all I had. I didn't know if anybody else had anything. And what Zainab said previously as well with the data, if there was something specific you were looking for with your data, or if you had anything you wanted to look at, please let us know, and we'd be happy to get that together for you. All right. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for everybody all being together. And if you do want contact information from anyone else on the project, if you want to collaborate or share any additional ideas, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to put you guys in touch.
And I just want to say once again, what a pleasure it's been, even more so now that I've seen the data, the great work that you guys were phenomenally successful in this very short time together. You did amazing things, and to see the sort of complete list of all the different PDSAs were done. Again, 6 months project, you guys were phenomenal. Please keep up the good work. Please reach out to us if you have any questions on how we can help you keep up the good work. We are planning to do a more general project around immunizations in general coming forward, and you will hear from us for sure regarding that. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you guys, and have a good weekend.
Thanks so much, you guys. This was great.
Awesome.
Thank you. Bye.